Behind the wholesome frontier facade of America's beloved family drama lay a treasure trove of bizarre secrets, shocking accidents, and Hollywood oddities that would make even the most devoted bonnethead do a double take. From time-traveling KFC founders to nuclear contamination fears, drunken coffee mugs to accidental tumbles that became TV history, the making of this Prairie classic was anything but ordinary. Here are 15 weird facts about Little House on the Prairie, 1974, you never knew. Fact 1. Carrie's famous fall was completely accidental. One of the most memorable moments in television history happened completely by accident during the filming of Little House on the Prairie's opening credits. The scene where little Carrie Ingalls tumbles down a grassy hill while running with her sisters has become an iconic image that viewers remember decades later, but this charming moment was never supposed to happen according to the original script. The role of Carrie Ingalls was shared between identical twin sisters Lindsay and Sydney Greenbush, who were just 3 years old when they started working on the show in 1974. Because of strict California labor laws governing child actors, the production team had to rotate the twins every few hours to ensure they didn't exceed their allowed working time. This meant that one twin would often be napping in a trailer while the other was filming scenes. On the day they were shooting the opening credits sequence, the director called for what the crew referred to as a fresh twin when it was time to film the hillside running scene. Sydney had been taking a nap in her trailer, and her mother quickly woke her up to get her ready for the scene. In the rush to get Sydney back on set, her mother accidentally put the little girl's high-button period shoes on the wrong feet. When the cameras started rolling and Sydney began running down the hill with Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson, who played her older sisters Laura and Mary, she immediately lost her balance because of the backward shoes. The 3-year-old tumbled forward and rolled down the grassy slope in a way that looked both natural and endearing. Michael Landon, who was directing the scene, thought Sydney's accidental fall was so adorable and authentic that he decided to keep it in the final version of the opening credits. The crew checked to make sure Sydney wasn't hurt, and when they saw she was perfectly fine and even giggling about her tumble, they knew they had captured something special. This unplanned moment became one of the most beloved and recognizable images from the entire 9-season run of Little House on the Prairie, proving that sometimes the best television moments happen when nobody expects them. Fact 2. Colonel Sanders' time traveled to the 1880s. In one of the most bizarre and anachronistic moments in Little House on the Prairie history, the actual founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken makes a guest appearance in an episode that's supposed to take place decades before he was even born. During Season 8's episode titled Wave of the Future, Colonel Harlan Sanders himself shows up in Walnut Grove to offer Harriet Oleson a deal to start her own chicken franchise, creating a timeline problem that defies all logic. The episode centers around Nellie Oleson opening a restaurant that eventually transforms into a franchise operation. But things don't go according to plan, and Nellie begins to regret her business decisions. In an attempt to break free from her franchise contract, she teams up with Charles Ingalls and her father Nels to open a rival restaurant that would compete directly with the corporate establishment. This is when the show takes a completely unexpected turn into the realm of time travel. Colonel Sanders appears in the episode to make Harriet Oleson an offer to start her own chicken franchise, complete with his signature white suit and distinctive appearance that made him famous in the real world. The problem with this cameo is that it creates an impossible historical situation that the show's writers apparently didn't consider when they were developing the storyline. The real Colonel Harlan Sanders wasn't born until 1890, which means he would have been completely non-existent during the 1870s and 1880s when Little House on the Prairie is supposed to take place. Even more problematic is the fact that Kentucky Fried Chicken as a company didn't exist until 1952, which is more than 70 years after the show's setting. Sanders didn't even begin developing his famous chicken recipe and restaurant concept until he was well into his adult years during the 20th century. Adding to the anachronistic humor of this situation, rumors persist that the fried chicken served on the Little House set during filming actually came from real Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants, making this bizarre time-traveling cameo even more connected to the modern fast food chain that somehow appeared in the 19th century Prairie setting. Fact 3. The show was filmed on Wizard of Oz's soundstage. Little House on the Prairie shares a magical connection with one of Hollywood's most beloved classic films that most viewers never realized existed. In 1978, the production moved from Paramount Studios to MGM's Stage 15, which happened to be the largest soundstage on the MGM lot and the exact same location where The Wizard of Oz was filmed nearly 40 years earlier in 1939. During the first few seasons of Little House on the Prairie, the indoor scenes were shot at Paramount Studios in Hollywood on adjoining stages 30 and 31. However, when the show needed a larger space for their elaborate interior sets, the production team decided to relocate to MGM Studios in Culver City. Stage 15 was chosen specifically because it offered the most room for the detailed recreations of the Ingalls family cabin, the Walnut Grove Church, and the town's general store that were essential to the show's authentic pioneer atmosphere. What makes this location change truly extraordinary is the incredible moment that happened when Ray Bolger made a guest appearance on Little House during Season 5. Bolger, who had played the beloved Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, was visiting the set when he decided to show the cast and crew something special that connected their current production to Hollywood history. During his time on the Little House set, Bolger removed some of the flooring from a section of Stage 15 where an old broken oil heater had been torn out years earlier. Underneath the floorboards, he uncovered actual remnants of the original yellow brick road from The Wizard of Oz that had remained intact and hidden for decades after the classic film was completed. The children and adult cast members were absolutely thrilled when Bolger revealed this piece of movie history that had been lying directly beneath their feet while they filmed their Prairie family drama. This discovery created an incredible connection between Dorothy's journey to the Emerald City and the Ingalls family's adventures on the American frontier, linking two completely different stories that were filmed in the exact same space but separated by nearly 4 decades of Hollywood history. Fact 4. Michael Landon secretly sipped vodka from his coffee mug. Behind the wholesome image of Charles Ingalls, the devoted family man who taught moral lessons on the American frontier, Michael Landon had drinking habits that would have shocked the millions of families who watched Little House on the Prairie every week. While viewers saw him as the perfect father figure dispensing wisdom and working hard to support his pioneer family, Landon was actually consuming alcohol throughout the filming day, in ways that nobody watching at home could have imagined. Alison Arngrim, who played the mischievous Nellie Oleson, discovered Landon's secret drinking habit quite by accident during one of her breaks from filming. She often took naps in the prop truck to escape the intense California heat, and during one of these rest periods, she overheard Landon talking to the show's prop man, Ron Chiniquy, at the back of the truck. When she heard Landon say, "Hit me," she quietly lifted her head to see what was happening and witnessed Chiniquy pouring what she later described as 4 fingers of wild turkey bourbon directly into Landon's coffee cup, even though it was only 10 o'clock in the morning. This early morning drinking was apparently just the beginning of a day-long alcohol consumption pattern that extended throughout the entire cast and crew of the show. According to Arngrim and other cast members who later spoke about their experiences, the Little House production team typically went through an average of 2 full cases of Coors beer every single day while they were working. On particularly stressful days when rewrites were necessary or multiple takes were required to get scenes right, the crew referred to these as 3-case days because their alcohol consumption increased even more. Despite this heavy drinking culture on the set, cast members consistently reported that nobody ever appeared to be visibly intoxicated or unprofessional while they were working. The alcohol consumption seemed to be a way for the cast and crew to cope with the demanding schedule and harsh filming conditions, but it never interfered with their ability to create the heartwarming family entertainment that made Little House on the Prairie such a beloved show for generations of viewers who had no idea what was really happening behind the cameras. Fact 5. Caroline's bra kept, making anachronistic appearances. One of the most persistent wardrobe mistakes in Little House on the Prairie involves Caroline Ingalls and a piece of undergarment technology that simply didn't exist during the time period when the show was supposed to take place. Throughout multiple episodes and seasons, viewers with sharp eyes could spot Karen Grassel's modern bra through her period-appropriate prairie dresses, creating a glaring historical inaccuracy that somehow made it past the costume department and editors time and time again. Little House on the Prairie was set during the 1870s and 1880s, when pioneer women living on the American frontier would have worn completely different undergarments than what modern women use today. During that historical period, women typically wore corsets, chemises, and other foundation garments that were designed very differently from 20th century brasiers. The modern bra as we know it today wasn't actually invented until 1912, which means Caroline Ingalls was wearing an undergarment that wouldn't exist for another 30 to 40 years after the show's timeline. The problem occurred because when Caroline moved in certain ways during scenes, her modern bra would become visible through the fabric of her prairie dress or when the neckline shifted during physical activity. This happened frequently enough that it became one of the show's most noticeable continuity errors for viewers who were paying attention to historical accuracy. The mistake was particularly obvious during scenes where Caroline was doing household chores, working in the garden, or engaging in other physical activities that caused her clothing to move in ways that revealed the clearly modern undergarment beneath. This wardrobe mistake highlights one of the ongoing challenges that period television shows and movies face when trying to create authentic historical settings while working with modern actors who are accustomed to contemporary clothing and comfort. The costume department for Little House on the Prairie went to great lengths to create authentic-looking pioneer clothing for the main characters, but apparently overlooked the importance of ensuring that the undergarments matched the historical period as well. The fact that this particular anachronism appeared repeatedly throughout the series suggests that either the costume supervisors didn't catch the mistake, or they decided that modern undergarments were necessary for the comfort and practicality of filming in demanding outdoor conditions. Fact 6. The desert was disguised as Minnesota Prairie. The lush green grasslands and rolling hills that viewers associate with the Ingalls family homestead were actually created through an elaborate Hollywood illusion that transformed the arid desert landscape of Southern California into a convincing replica of Minnesota prairie land. Little House on the Prairie was filmed at Big Sky Ranch in Simi Valley, California, which is located about 40 miles northwest of Los Angeles in Ventura County, where the natural terrain consists of dry, desert-like conditions that look nothing like the fertile farmland of the upper Midwest. To create the authentic prairie appearance that the show required, the production team installed an extensive underground irrigation system consisting of buried pipes that could water large sections of the filming location. This elaborate watering system was necessary to convert the naturally brown and barren California desert into the green, grassy landscape that would convince television audiences they were watching a family living on the fertile plains of Minnesota during the 1870s and 1880s. The climate challenges at the filming location created extremely difficult working conditions for the cast and crew, particularly during the summer months when most of the outdoor scenes were shot to accommodate the child actors' school schedules. Temperatures at the Simi Valley location regularly soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit and frequently climbed as high as 110 degrees during the hottest parts of filming days. These scorching temperatures were especially brutal for the actors who had to wear heavy, multi-layered period costumes that were designed to be historically accurate for 19th-century pioneer families. The women's dresses included long sleeves, high necklines, and multiple petticoats underneath, while the men wore wool pants, long-sleeved shirts, and heavy boots that provided no relief from the intense heat. Allison Arngrim, who played Nellie Oleson, and an assistant director both fainted from heat exhaustion during filming because of the combination of the extreme temperatures and the stifling period clothing. Despite these challenging conditions, the artificial irrigation system successfully created the green, pastoral setting that became iconic in the show's opening credits and helped establish the authentic pioneer atmosphere that made Little House on the Prairie such a beloved family television series. Fact 7. Laura's pregnancy lasted over a year. One of the most glaring continuity errors in Little House on the Prairie involves Laura Ingalls Wilder's first pregnancy, which somehow managed to stretch across multiple seasons and defy every known law of human biology. During Season 7, Laura's pregnancy began in what was clearly springtime, with blooming flowers and fresh green vegetation visible in the background of scenes, but her pregnancy continued well into the following summer without her ever giving birth, creating a timeline that would have made medical history if it were real. The pregnancy storyline was an important plot development for the character of Laura, who was played by Melissa Gilbert and had grown from a young girl into a married woman over the course of the series. When Laura announced that she and her husband Almanzo were expecting their first child, the show depicted this as happening during the spring season, with the natural scenery clearly showing the renewal and growth that comes with warmer weather after a long prairie winter. However, as the episodes continued to air and the storyline progressed, viewers began to notice that Laura remained visibly pregnant through what should have been the normal 9-month gestation period and well beyond. The background scenery in subsequent episodes showed the full bloom of summer, with lush green grass and fully developed vegetation that indicated months had passed since the initial pregnancy announcement, yet Laura was still expecting and showed no signs of being close to delivery. This extended pregnancy timeline created confusion for viewers who were paying attention to the natural progression of seasons shown in the outdoor scenes. The problem likely occurred because the show's filming schedule and episode production didn't align properly with the storyline timeline that the writers had planned for Laura's pregnancy. Television shows often film episodes out of sequence or over extended periods that don't match the story timeline, but this particular continuity error was especially noticeable because pregnancy has such a specific and well-known duration. Melissa Gilbert herself acknowledged this bizarre timeline issue in her cookbook, where she and a fan who had been tracking the show's continuity errors noted that Laura appeared to be pregnant for well over a year according to the visual evidence shown in the episodes. Fact 8. Nellie's terrifying wheelchair scene used real broken arm. The famous Bunny episode from Season 3 of Little House on the Prairie contains one of the most memorable and dramatic scenes in the entire series, but what viewers didn't know is that Alison Arngrim's terrified screams during the climactic wheelchair scene were completely genuine due to a real injury and a cruel prank played by the crew. The episode features Nellie Oleson pretending to be paralyzed after falling from her horse in order to get attention and sympathy from everyone in Walnut Grove, until Laura discovers the deception and decides to teach Nellie a lesson she'll never forget. The dramatic climax occurs when Laura takes Nellie to the top of a steep hill in her wheelchair and gives her an almighty push, sending the wheelchair careening down the rocky slope while Nellie screams in terror. What made this scene particularly authentic was that Alison Arngrim had recently broken her wrist in a real skateboarding accident that happened when she wasn't filming, so the plaster cast that viewers see on Nellie's arm throughout the episode was completely genuine and not a prop created by the makeup department. While a professional stunt double was used for the shot where Nellie actually flies out of the wheelchair and lands in the pond at the bottom of the hill, Arngrim herself was required to ride in the rickety 1870s-era wooden wheelchair during the close-up shots so that her face could be seen as she screamed. The wheelchair was attached to safety ropes that were supposed to prevent any real danger during the filming, but the crew decided to play a practical joke that resulted in Arngrim's most terrified performance of her entire acting career. Just before the director called "Action!" for the second take of the wheelchair ride, one of the crew members shouted, "Oh no, the rope broke!" even though the safety rope was still completely intact and secure. Arngrim had no way of knowing that this was just a prank, so when the wheelchair began rolling down the hill, she genuinely believed that she was in serious danger. Her terrified screams as she bounced and rolled down the rocky slope while struggling with her one good hand to stay in the chair were completely authentic reactions to what she thought was a life-threatening situation, making this one of the most convincingly frightening scenes in Little House history. Fact 9. A dummy accidentally became a stunt double. One of the most unintentionally hilarious bloopers in Little House on the Prairie history occurred during the dramatic Season 5 episode titled The Odyssey, where the show's editors completely missed a comical mistake that makes one of the most intense action scenes look absolutely ridiculous to viewers who know what to look for. The episode features a suspenseful moment where someone attempts to throw Albert Ingalls off a moving train, but Laura quickly jumps into action and pushes the villain off the train before he can hurt her adopted brother. This dramatic rescue scene was supposed to showcase Laura's quick thinking and bravery as she saves Albert from serious harm, and the action sequence required the use of both a mannequin and a real stuntman to create the illusion of the villain being thrown from the train and tumbling down a steep hillside. The production team used the dummy for the initial throw from the train car, while the stuntman was responsible for the rolling and tumbling action that would show the characters fall down the embankment. However, something went wrong during the filming or editing process that created one of the most obvious and amusing mistakes in the entire series. When viewers watch the scene carefully, they can clearly see the mannequin that was thrown from the train sitting completely motionless in the grass at the bottom of the hill, looking obviously fake and unnaturally stiff. At the same time, a real stuntman can be seen rolling down the hillside past the stationary dummy, creating the bizarre visual of two different versions of the same character existing in the same shot. The mistake is so obvious once you notice it that it's hard to understand how the editors missed it during the post-production process. The dummy sits in such an unnatural position and remains so perfectly still that it clearly looks like a mannequin rather than a person who has just been thrown from a moving train. Meanwhile, the professional stuntman continues his carefully choreographed tumbling sequence, completely unaware that the fake version of the character he's supposed to be portraying is sitting motionless in the background, creating an unintentionally comedic moment in what was meant to be one of the episode's most dramatic and action-packed sequences. Fact 10. Michael Landon wore 4-inch platform boots. Michael Landon, who played the strong and confident patriarch Charles Ingalls, harbored a deep insecurity about his height that led him to go to extraordinary lengths to appear taller than he actually was during the filming of Little House on the Prairie. At 5 feet 9 inches tall, Landon was actually of average height for a man, but he felt self-conscious about his stature and worried that he didn't look imposing enough to convincingly play the role of a rugged frontier father who could handle any challenge that came his way. To compensate for what he perceived as a height disadvantage, Landon wore specially designed boots that contained 4-inch platform soles, which gave him a significant boost in height and helped him tower over his co-stars during scenes. These weren't subtle lifts hidden inside normal-looking boots, but rather obvious platform shoes that added substantial height to his frame and changed his entire silhouette when he appeared on camera alongside the other actors in the cast. However, the platform boots were just the beginning of Landon's elaborate efforts to appear taller during filming. The production crew became accustomed to helping Landon achieve additional height through creative positioning and set design that would make him look more imposing in every scene. Directors and camera operators would regularly have Landon stand on ladders, staircases, small boxes, or even carefully constructed mounds of dirt during filming to give him extra elevation above his co-stars. Alison Arngrim, who played Nellie Oleson, later commented on Landon's height obsession in her memoir, noting that he would do everything possible to gain height during filming, except dig holes for the rest of the cast to stand in. The techniques were so elaborate and consistent that they became a normal part of the filming process, with crew members automatically looking for ways to position Landon higher than everyone else in each shot. Despite these efforts to appear taller, Landon's height manipulation techniques were successful enough that most viewers never realized he was using artificial methods to enhance his stature. The combination of platform boots and strategic positioning created the visual impression of a tall, commanding presence that perfectly matched the character of Charles Ingalls as the strong leader of his pioneer family. Fact 11. The town exploded because of legal requirements. The explosive destruction of Walnut Grove in the series finale of Little House on the Prairie wasn't just a dramatic storytelling choice designed to give the beloved town a memorable send-off, but was actually the result of very practical legal requirements that the production company had to fulfill when their filming contract came to an end. The final episode, titled The Last Farewell, features the townspeople making the defiant decision to blow up their entire community rather than let it fall into the hands of a ruthless land developer. But the real reason behind this spectacular destruction had everything to do with Hollywood business practices and contractual obligations. NBC had leased the land for the Walnut Grove set from Getty Oil Company and the Newhall Land and Development Corporation with very specific terms about how the property would be returned when filming concluded. One of the most important conditions in the original lease agreement was that the production company would be required to restore the land to its original state, meaning that all of the buildings, sets, and structures that had been constructed for the show would need to be completely removed before the land was returned to its owners. Producer Kent McCrae initially suggested that the production team could simply demolish the buildings using conventional methods and then bring in equipment to pick up all the debris and cart it away, which would have fulfilled their legal obligation to return the land to its pre-filming condition. However, Michael Landon saw an opportunity to turn this practical necessity into a dramatic conclusion for the series that would give both the characters and the audience a satisfying ending to their 9-year journey. Landon decided to incorporate the required demolition directly into the script for the final episode, asking, "What if we blow up the town?" as a way to handle both the legal requirement and the storytelling need for a memorable finale. He wrote the explosive destruction into the plot, but made sure to leave the Ingalls family homestead and the church untouched, since these structures had special significance for the characters and the audience. Landon later explained that he thought this approach would make for a good, strong pioneer ending and provide a cathartic experience for both the cast and crew who had spent nearly a decade creating stories in this fictional community. Fact 12. Nuclear contamination fears haunt the cast. A dark cloud of suspicion has surrounded Little House on the Prairie for decades due to the troubling proximity of the filming location to one of the worst nuclear disasters in American history and the unusually high number of cancer cases that later affected the show's cast and crew. For 9 years, from 1974 to 1983, the beloved family series was filmed at Big Sky Ranch in Simi Valley, California, which is located just 15 miles away from the Santa Susana Field Laboratory, where a partial nuclear reactor meltdown occurred in 1959. The Santa Susana facility, operated by Rocketdyne, experienced what the California Department of Toxic Substances Control has described as one of the worst radioactive disasters in United States history, with the effects of the contamination lasting for decades after the initial incident. According to reports, illegal disposal of nuclear waste continued in the area until the 1980s, meaning that contamination was still ongoing during the entire period when Little House on the Prairie was being filmed at the nearby location. The concerns about potential health effects became more serious when an alarming number of cast and crew members from the show later developed various forms of cancer. Michael Landon, who played Charles Ingalls and served as the show's executive producer and frequent director, died of pancreatic cancer in 1991 at the young age of 54. Victor French, who portrayed the beloved character Isaiah Edwards, died of lung cancer, while Kevin Hagen, who played Doc Baker, succumbed to esophageal cancer. Merlin Olsen, who played Jonathan Garvey, died of mesothelioma, and Charlotte Stewart, who portrayed the schoolteacher Miss Beadle, is a breast cancer survivor. Studies performed on the Santa Susana area have suggested that the contamination may have been responsible for up to 2,000 cancer-related deaths and led to a 60% increase in various types of cancer, including lung, bladder, kidney, liver, blood, lymph node, and thyroid cancers among people who lived or worked in the surrounding region. However, it's important to note that no direct causal link has ever been officially established or proven between the filming location and the health problems experienced by the Little House cast members, and other factors such as smoking and family history may have contributed to their illnesses. Fact 13. The same quilt mysteriously traveled between houses. Eagle-eyed fans of Little House on the Prairie have discovered one of the show's most amusing continuity errors, involving a distinctive quilt that seems to have a magical ability to transport itself between different homes throughout Walnut Grove, without any explanation from the characters or the storyline. This particular quilt, which features a unique pattern and color scheme that makes it easily recognizable, appears in multiple episodes covering several seasons, but instead of staying in one family's home where it would logically belong, it mysteriously shows up on beds and furniture in completely different households across the community. The traveling quilt mystery began when dedicated viewers started paying close attention to the background details and set decorations that appeared in various interior scenes throughout the series. These fans noticed that the same unmistakable quilt would appear in the Ingalls family cabin during one episode, then show up weeks or months later adorning a bed in the Olesen household, and later be spotted in yet another family's home without any mention of how it had moved from place to place. This strange phenomenon occurred because the Little House production team was operating under the typical budget constraints that affect most television shows, which means they had to find creative ways to reuse props and set decorations to save money while still creating authentic-looking pioneer homes for the different families in Walnut Grove. The prop department had a limited supply of period-appropriate quilts and blankets that looked convincing for the 1870s and 1880s setting, so they would move these items between different sets, depending on which scenes were being filmed and which families were featured in particular episodes. While this prop recycling was a practical and economical solution for the production team, it created an unintentional mystery for viewers who were paying attention to the details. The same distinctive quilt would appear in the background of scenes featuring different families, sometimes within just a few episodes of each other, making it seem like the quilt had somehow traveled between homes without any of the characters acknowledging its movement or explaining how different families had acquired the same unique bedding item throughout the various storylines of the series. Fact 14. Ma always cooked the same meal. Caroline Ingalls may have appeared to be a devoted pioneer wife who spent countless hours preparing varied and nutritious meals for her hardworking family, but viewers who paid close attention to the food scenes throughout Little House on the Prairie would have noticed that Ma's cooking repertoire was surprisingly limited and relied heavily on modern convenience foods that wouldn't have existed on the 1870s frontier. Despite the show's careful attention to period-accurate costumes, buildings, and farming equipment, the food that appeared in most kitchen and dining scenes came straight from 20th-century grocery stores and fast food restaurants. The most frequently used food prop throughout the entire 9-season run of the series was Dinty Moore beef stew, which came from regular cans that the production team would empty into period-appropriate pots and bowls to create the illusion of home-cooked pioneer meals. This canned stew appeared in episode after episode, serving as the go-to meal whenever the script called for Caroline to be cooking dinner for the family or serving food to guests who had come to visit the Ingalls homestead. When the storyline required Caroline to prepare chicken for her family, the production team took an even more obvious shortcut by using fried chicken that was purchased directly from Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants. The crew would buy buckets of KFC chicken and arrange the pieces in cast-iron skillets and serving dishes to make it look like Caroline had spent hours preparing fresh poultry from chickens that the family had raised on their own farm. This reliance on modern convenience foods was purely a practical decision made by the production team to save time and money during filming. Preparing authentic pioneer meals from scratch would have required significant time and resources that the show's budget and shooting schedule couldn't accommodate, especially considering that most of the food would only be seen briefly in the background of scenes before being discarded. The irony of this food situation becomes even more apparent when considering that the show was supposed to depict a family living completely self-sufficiently on the frontier, growing their own crops and raising their own livestock to provide all of their meals, yet the actual food that viewers saw them eating came from modern food processing plants and commercial restaurants that represented the exact opposite of the pioneer lifestyle that Little House on the Prairie was trying to portray. Fact 15. Caste relationships were secretly toxic. The heartwarming sisterly bond between Laura and Mary Ingalls that millions of viewers cherished throughout Little House on the Prairie was nothing more than exceptional acting, because behind the cameras, Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson could barely tolerate each other during the 9 years they worked together on the show. While their characters shared touching moments, supported each other through difficult times, and demonstrated the kind of family loyalty that made the series so beloved, the real relationship between the two young actresses was marked by tension, dislike, and professional rivalry that they managed to keep hidden from audiences until years after the show ended. The problems between Gilbert and Anderson began early in the series and continued throughout their time working together, with Gilbert later describing their interactions as difficult and unpleasant in ways that completely contradicted the loving relationship their characters shared on screen. In her memoir titled Prairie, which was published years after Little House on the Prairie had ended, Gilbert held nothing back when discussing her former co-star and revealed the true nature of their behind-the-scenes relationship. Gilbert described Anderson as being cold and stuck up during their years of working together, suggesting that Anderson maintained a distant and unfriendly attitude toward her fellow cast members that made it difficult to develop any genuine friendship or camaraderie off-camera. According to Gilbert's account, Anderson's behavior created an uncomfortable working environment that required both actresses to rely entirely on their professional acting skills to create the convincing sisterly chemistry that viewers saw in their scenes together. The tension between the two actresses was apparently obvious enough that other cast members noticed the problem and had their own difficulties working with Anderson. Alison Arngrim, who played Nellie Oleson, also mentioned in her own memoir that she found Anderson to be aloof and difficult to connect with during their time on the show, confirming that Gilbert's negative experiences were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader pattern of behavior that affected multiple relationships on the set. This revelation about the toxic relationship between the two main child actresses adds a layer of complexity to the show's legacy and demonstrates the remarkable professionalism that both Gilbert and Anderson displayed in their ability to create believable family relationships despite their personal animosity toward each other.